Okay, we're live.
Terrific. Thanks everyone for joining. My name is Ben Vershbow. I'm the Director of Community Programs of the Wikimedia Foundation. That comprises the GLAM team, the Libraries team, and the Education team. And I'm very pleased today that we're going to be, I've been looking forward to this day, to hear a presentation on a really wonderful project undertaken this summer by two interns that we've been very, very fortunate to have on our team that were recruited at the beginning of the summer, Sailesh and Alan, and they will introduce themselves, and Nicole will do more of an intro. But what they've been doing these last few months is doing or beginning what we intend to be a comprehensive mapping of the Wikimedia and education movement within the movement. As we all know, there's been a rich, diverse range of education activities going on in all parts of the movement for years now. But there hasn't been a very consistently maintained central knowledge base about these activities in all their variety in a way that was kind of well organized and maintained. So Alan and Sailesh have very bravely jumped in to kind of help us lay the foundations for what we intend to be an ongoing, continuous, living data collection effort that will serve as a resource for the foundation, for the community, for the world to better understand how Wikimedia and education can come together and are coming together all the time. So I'm very pleased that this work has begun, and I'm very grateful to the work that you both have done. So I'll hand this over to Nicole, I believe, who will maybe do a bit more of a detailed intro to this, and then we'll get underway. But thank you everyone for joining us, wherever you may be tuning in from.
Thanks, Ben. I don't have too much more to say, just that it was a really great experience having Sailesh and Alan as interns on the education team over the summer. They've been working with us for 10 weeks and undertook this kind of massive task to go through all of the documentation that basically lives everywhere and try to put together a comprehensive map of Wikimedia and education so that we can have a resource where we can have a bird's eye view of what's going on around the world, both historically and present, and then also be able to pull kind of insights from that to find global trends. So that said, I just want to pass the floor to Alan and Sailesh, who will be presenting about their experience and their work. And I'm really looking forward to having you all hear about it, because it's been great.
Great. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Ben, for the overly kind introduction. I'm going to share my screen. So if you wouldn't mind, give me one moment. And I think I am sharing, and now I'm going to start the presentation. Well, great. Well, thank you all for joining us for our Wikimedia Mapping Project presentation. I know that for Sailesh and myself, I'll let him kind of speak to that as well. It's been really a privilege to work with Nicole, Vahid, Ben, kind of the whole team to try and sort of put in a database and start thinking through and organizing sort of the wonderful work a lot of people are doing across the entire Wikimedia education ecosystem. That honestly, as someone who before joining the team had no idea kind of the vastness and the great quality of things that are happening all across the globe. So I'm Alan. I'm a former educator. And so, of course, as an educator, but then also just kind of as a non-educator, I've spent a lot of time using Wikimedia's different offerings. I think I remember I fell in love with Wikipedia as soon as I discovered it, I think 10, 13 years ago. And so it was really sort of a privilege to be able to see up close what a lot of the work people were working on. And I'm going to pass it off to Sailesh to introduce himself.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan. First of all, thank you, Nicole, and the education team for giving us the opportunity to work on this project. My name is Sailesh Patnaik. I'm a long-time Wikipedia volunteer. I've been volunteering to the movement from last 6 years, and I'm quite active on Wikipedia outreach programs and partnerships. So I have some idea of the education programs, and it was a nice experience to see and understand how the education program is doing globally and how different the education programs are from the education programs we are doing here, and to understand the programs. Thank you, Nicole, and the team.
Great. And so really the purpose of this exercise was to highlight that Wikimedians are doing amazing things everywhere. We want to be able to document it, make it widely available, and then kind of this foundation that we're hoping to lay is to allow Wikimedians everywhere to both contribute to this and then hopefully have it stand as sort of an organic, growing repository so that as volunteers all across the world are doing these great programs with students at the university level, the secondary level, primary level, it's going to be documented so that Wikimedians can not only be proud of what they're doing and it's showcased for the world, but really it can be a place to build off of and do work all across the planet, especially as sort of the movement for knowledge and education access and agency really continues to take hold. And really, sort of the Wikimedia affiliates and leaders have adopted different documentation strategies. So really, we wanted to centralize these resources so that they can be localized by different community members. And we'll touch a little bit on some of the different documentation we have. Sailesh, do you want to touch a little bit more on this?
So we have that's the most interesting part, one of the most interesting part of this this mapping project, that you can't find a centralized document, though we have an education page on outreach.wikimedia.org, but not every education program is documented over there. So different affiliates and the educational leaders have adopted different strategies to document their work. They have documented there in their native Wikipedia project, either on Meta or as an outreach dashboard, or they have used different methods of documentation. So as Ben and Alan have said before, that our main object of this internship or of this mapping project was to centralize the data so that it can be used by different community members. You can understand how other community members are doing education programs in that country, in that project, and it will be easy for us to localize those programs and be in touch with the educational leader. That was one of the main point or main focus for this mapping project.
A lot of great documentation.
Alan?
Yes, can you hear me?
No, please go ahead.
Oh yeah, great. So we used, there were a lot of different places where we could find information. So we sort of, the way we divvied up the task and sort of our methodology was, we sort of split it up. Sailesh has a lot of sort of intimate knowledge of the different resources and dashboards and such of Wikimedia that Wikimedia uses. So he focused on those, and I focused more on things like the country pages. So looking in the documentation that the Wikimedia country pages have themselves and looking at the different programs and any sort of external resources they'd linked. I looked at Facebook pages, so looking at different country Facebook pages, seeing what kinds of information on education programs we could find there, the grants and the newsletters. And then we were fortunate to conduct a couple of interviews and have a couple more coming up before our time concludes. And really for that was an opportunity for us to speak with leaders on the ground who are really doing a lot of the work, spearheading a lot of these things, to speak with them and get sort of firsthand knowledge from them about what it was they were working on. Sailesh, do you want to go over a little bit about your research as well?
So thank you so I'd like to thank the education leaders who spent some time or shared their valuable time with us for sharing their project. We did some actual interviews with some of the Wikipedians, and we got to know where they have documented their education programs. So it was not like it's only on a special project of the Wikimedia or not on like Meta or Outreach. Some of the Wikipedians have documented their programs in their user group annual report. Some of them were in Outreach dashboard. Some of them were in conference grants, in the annual plan grants. So we went through a lot of projects and a lot of places where we could find, and we tried as much as we can do to look over your projects and map them or put them under our centralized data spreadsheet.
Great. And the map itself really aims to be comprehensive. So I'll keep sharing my screen and take us to the actual map database we have here. And again, this has been a work in progress, and bless Nicole for all the wonderful feedback she's given us. It was, a kind of a data dump, and then we've just been working a lot on organizing the information. To give a little bit of background, we'll go over sort of what each of the properties means. So we've been looking at, for instance, we want to summarize each of the programs, a very, very brief summary so that people just get a sense of what it is, and we'll go over the actual mapping data in a moment. Got an English label for the project or activity, and then various properties. So for example, the affiliates and the organizations, whether that's Wiki EDU, Wikimedia Armenia, so forth, the country, of course, the region, the main contact person or the focal point, and then other things like the project model, the projects used, the level of education. So whether that's targeting K through 12, primary school students, university, and we found there's quite a bit of variability there. Subjects, and then if there was information we had on funding, evaluation, case studies, and then any media reports of them as well. If we take a quick look on the second tab here for the mapping data, for example, right now it's sort of alphabetized by country, and we're going to eventually sort it by region. But if we look, for example, let's say Wiki Academy Albania. So it was a great project where Albanian speaking Wikimedians started organizing workshops about Wikipedia in different cities. So we dug deep to find the start date, the end date, the region. That was a little bit easier, who the main focal point was, and then really just trying to make a uniform case about what each of the different things stood for. So for example, what kind of a model? So this was student editing training was the primary focus. Which project? Wiki Academy, Wikipedia. It was targeted towards primary schools, and we'll fix that to say university. And then sort of what were the educational challenges and issues addressed. And if we just take a quick look kind of throughout the document, and we'll touch on this in a little bit, we're going to eventually open this up to the whole ecosystem to help edit. And then we want to centralize it in Wiki Base so that people can have access to it. But I think we were able to find roughly about 120 different instances throughout our research in places in China, Albania, Catalonian resources. And we tried to be sort of comprehensive. In fact, the place we spent the least amount of time looking, and that's kind of our last, is, we saw some programs for example, in the United States, but we really want to have a keen discerning eye to highlight the programs all across the world that, may not have had the opportunities to highlight them that we would really like. And we want to eventually open it up to everyone to be able to both contribute and make sure that any of the research we've done, make sure that it's accurate, make sure that it's reflective of what's happening there. And so we'll have this centralized, and soon enough we'll have it so that we can have people actually give comments on what's happening. So we'll touch on that in a little bit.
We can just say that we have a centralized and structured data. So if you're familiar with Wiki Data, it's currently the way we have mapped the education programs is quite familiar with the Wiki Base of the Wiki Data. You can find labels, descriptions, QIDs, which will further be developed into a Wiki Base. So as Alan spoke there, you can find different instances of different labels in the mapping. For some programs, we did find a lot of resources to fill in those data, but for some we haven't. So we will still look for the community help in that.
Right. I'll go ahead and start presenting the screen again. And we did want to highlight a couple of specific programs we saw. So for example, one I was fortunate enough to read about, including sort of a media article writing up sort of the results, was Armenian students editing Wikipedia pages. So there were competitions across schools in Armenia where students, learned about Wikipedia, learned about sort of its value and its ability to help drive sort of educational agency. And then students had competitions around the country where students then were editing pages and then competing against one another to see, who could do the finest job throughout the course of the country. And if we look here, for example, at one of our resources, these are the exact kind of things we were fortunate enough to be able to read. So a lot of this information came from this write-up here in the blog. And so again, the rich, vast resources we were able to have at our disposal, from the country pages to these write-ups, one gave us a lot of insight, but really we kind of highlighted how critical it is that we do, lay the foundation to allow people to begin seeing, contributing, and working on making sure that we have a central repository for all of this great work. And another one we wanted to highlight, which Sailesh will touch on, is a program in Taiwan.
Yeah. Thank you, Alan. One of the interesting projects that I came across while doing the mapping project is by Wikimedia Taiwan. It's quite interesting to see that though I didn't find a lot of documentation on Outreach Wiki, though they have done a quite good documentation on Outreach Wiki. I went through the Chinese Wikipedia documentation where they have done a much better documentation where they have highlighted how they have involved the students and the university's professors and teachers for editing Wikipedia articles. One of the important or one of the projects that I would like to highlight among the education program activities in Taiwan is reading articles on the Aboriginals community of Taiwan. And they have been doing it very actively from quite a few years. And it's not only one institution that has helped the Wikimedia Taiwan doing that program. It has been a lot of more than 2 or 3 institutions that has helped Wikimedia Taiwan to do that. So it was quite interesting that how they have documented very well their education activities in their native Wikipedia. So that was one of the very good instances that though we don't see much documentation on global platforms, but the community is aware of what the activities they are doing and how they can share those activities within their community. So it was a good way I can say I really find those programs very interesting from Wikimedia Taiwan.
Right. And so as we've mentioned and we've touched on a bit, it highlights a lot of the education work done across the globe, but really it does remain incomplete. And in our time sort of wrapping things up, we want to really make sure we're working with everyone to help complete it. So the way we're sort of envisioning this, and I made sort of a random comment, but the way we're looking at it is we're going to make this available to the entire ecosystem and then have people have access to make comments around programs, countries, regions they're really familiar with, and especially around these specific projects that they're really familiar with. To say, for example, hey, this project in Cincinnati, actually I have a little bit more information. I have information about who the grant sponsor was, so on and so forth, to really help us continue to build this out in hopes of making this a central repository found in Wiki Base. So we really are excited to begin rolling this out, working with all of you once we sort of finalize on our end, and then also make sure that we have it really structured appropriately so that it becomes easier and user-friendly for everyone to begin to do it as well. And of course, in any sort of project like this, oh, go ahead, Sailesh.
Yes, sorry. So I just wanted to share that because some of the programs or some of the activities that we have looked for, we have in this academic exercise are kind of very latest documentation. We don't have programs which are like more than 5-6 years ago. Mostly we have some programs, but not for all programs. Some of them are from recent annual plan grants reports. So we still need your help to give us comments where we have mentioned some wrong information and whether the program started 2 years ago, or whether the program has not started, or there's some other description or some other media activities or grants that is involved in this program. So we are open to that. Please feel free to give us comment in this.
Yeah, great. And of course, I think for both of us, there were a lot of learnings and key takeaways for us. And I'll start off kind of on my end. One, I think it goes without saying there's a lot of great work being done everywhere. And as someone who's not as immersed in the Wikimedia sort of family as Sailesh and the rest of the education team, it's not all Wikipedia. There's a lot of great resources out there that are really sort of pushing the mission forward, and the passionate volunteers are what make it all click. I think it's really apparent that there's a lot of passionate people giving up their time, their energy, the infinite number of other things they could be doing to really make sure a lot of these programs are reality. And I think it's really inspiring, certainly to see. And documentation is critical. So I think moving forward, especially, it's going to be really critical to continue documenting these things so that, one, people are aware it's happening both within communities, outside of communities, but then importantly, that the ecosystem continue to build off of one another and see that, wow, in Armenia, something great was happening, or wow, in Tajikistan, something great was happening, and I want to try this in my own community, and really build off of that to continue to spread the mission even further.
Yes, So I'll like to highlight some of the things as well. Say, so some of the education programs have mostly involved Wikipedia as their primary Wikimedia projects, but there are the community education programs. Those have involved Wikisource, Wiki Data, and Commons as a part of the education program. They have trained the students to contribute to those Wikimedia projects. One of the things that I would like to ask some of the education leaders, like, though I can say after doing the research or after doing the mapping exercise for quite some time, I realized that almost 70% of the education program has involved solely Wikipedia as their primary Wikimedia project. Is there any challenges that we face involving other Wikimedia projects like Wikidata, Wikisource, or Commons? Some of the interesting takeaways from my part is like there are some small language Wikipedias, though I don't know how to address that, whether if it's less than 100,000 articles, or some I can say small languages, or they have very small community. They have used Wikipedia education program as a tool to spread awareness of their language Wikipedia. I can see a lot of education program have actually used, a lot of education leaders have actually used education programs to spread awareness about their communities, about their project, or to increase articles on their Wikipedia as a part of the education program. Another thing is that different community has different stories and strategies. We can't just say that the Indian education program follows the same as of the German education program. They have different strategy. They involve different. They get involved with the students in different kind of flavors. For example, I can give an example of Christ University education program, where the first semester they teach students how to edit on Wikisource, and in the next semester they go for training Wikipedia articles, how to write on Wikipedia. So these are some of the interesting takeaways from the research project, I can say. And I would really like to hear from the educational leaders to understand why has it been a challenge to involve other Wikimedia projects, like other than Wikipedia, any other projects as a part of the education program?
Great. And then as far as next steps, of course, on our end, it's going to be finishing editing, research, and then sort of cleaning this up before we sort of share broadly so that it becomes incredibly user-friendly. Then, of course, we will share broadly with the network for input in hopes of, again, making this sort of a central repository. And then I think sort of institutionally, I guess, or organization-wide, we really want to make sure we're revisiting and making changes to this so that it really becomes sort of this organic database that people can, again, reference, add to, take away from, make updates to, that people can continue to use sort of in perpetuity as volunteers continue to do great things across the world. And then as much as we can sort of formalize the process, and I know this is sort of kind of a longer term goal, but to really visit annually or at some sort of time interval and start thinking through annual reporting, updating, to make sure that, again, the work is highlighted and that people can learn to really learn from the work that's being done so that, again, the whole ecosystem can really benefit from the work that's happening and that communities continue to flourish as a result of what's going on. So I think we would. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so for next few months, this Google spreadsheet will be your own Wikipedia. You feel free to give comments to us, edit. Initially there won't be any edit access, but feel free to give us comment where we can improve, where we can add more details to the education programs, and we could highlight more of your activities in that as well. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and again, we'd be remiss not to thank Nicole. She was simply fantastic throughout the whole process, gave us a lot of guidance, gave us a lot of autonomy. Vahid, Ben, and then I think just kind of the volunteers who were, one, helping us with the interviews, but then also the Wiki Data volunteer who helped us sort of get this really organized. So thank you to everyone, and we welcome any questions people have. And I saw the chat room was a buzz, so we'll look in there as well. But I think for now we can, we'll stop sharing. Would you say we should stop sharing, Ben or Nicole?
Yeah, I think you can stop sharing, and we'll just open the floor up for some questions. Ben, you want to say something?
No, I was just simply responding, saying, yeah, we could close down the deck and just go into a general discussion, Q&A. I'll keep an eye on the chat, so feel free to lob a question there or kind of virtually raise a hand. Maybe warm things up with, so obviously you had your hands more than full in trying to kind of pull together existing documentation in all its various fragmentary states. I wonder, as thinking ahead to how this can grow, what thoughts do we have about documenting the work that is out there that isn't already on one of the radars that we have, or one of the kind of in one of the kind of community documentation spaces, folks who are doing work in education contexts who haven't contacted the foundation, who don't even, who are not, don't know to contact us potentially. How do we find out about that?
Yeah, Sailesh, do you want to start?
Yeah, so when it's a quite a big challenge for us to do that, because I remember when Nicole asked me to look for the education programs in Palestine. I wasn't aware of that there's a community in Palestine, but I was aware that there is an user group working Wikimedians of Levant, or user group. So they work for the Levant region. So I reached out to one of the volunteers and asked, has there been any education program in Palestine? And he shared a user group report. So it was quite a different place to look at, because we never targeted user group report as a part of our research program. So I believe it's quite a challenge to look for the education leaders, for the community, those are doing education programs and hasn't been documented. I think we have to reach out to them personally to work with them. There is no finite solution from, I believe, from my end at least.
Yeah, and I think, Ben, that's a great point to raise. I think as much as outreach that can be done from the foundation side of things to really encourage people to do this, I think that's as much sort of highlighting this, I think, initial step in this foundation, I think, then reaching out and doing outreach and just making it broadly disseminated and accessible. I think that's the first step, because like you said, there are probably a lot of people who just don't know to sort of document this work. And I think it's critical that we can get as many voices heard as possible. I think that'll be a challenge, certainly to worth addressing.
But certainly having this, when this is a bit more visible, having this as sort of a hub will probably aid in that further outreach. Whereas right now it's sort of, you don't quite know where to point. So right. That's very helpful. Thank you.
One of the things that my colleague from CIS, he asked me to do as a part of the research was, if people are not very comfortable in adding information, we can reach out to them with a Google form. We can populate, we can spread, or we can share that Google form in different social media platforms, and a mailing list for the education leaders to at least share their activities with that, if they're not comfortable with the spreadsheet. But at the end of the day, I think we're doing the same work.
I saw Lauren's speech bubble kind of arise momentarily. Lauren, did you have a question or a comment? Oh, no worries, no worries. I actually had another question, just picking up on something that was mentioned a few times. People may have noticed the non-accidental orientation of the data model that you've been collecting in toward Wiki Data. There's even a kind of a QID field of, for uniquely numbering these instances. And it was mentioned that the intention is to eventually port this data into a Wiki Base. Is there anything more you would like to say about that, and sort of how you can, that's something that I remember Nicole had identified very early on as a direction for this, and we had discussed, well, let's definitely gather data in a model that will make this possible, even if we don't yet have the kind of resources to set up the installation. But what do you envision could happen if and when this is moved into a wiki base? And this is a question for Sailesh and Alan, but Nicole, anyone else who's been listening and thinking about how we use our own tools in the movement to manage community knowledge.
I guess the mainly the headings that we have for like country main focal point, their properties on Wiki Data and the education activities, the program activities that we have listed out will be the QID. So every education program will have its own QID on the Wiki Base for now. Right? If Nicole can share more on that.
Yeah, maybe I can also give a little background into the format of the data collection. So the idea for the format came about when I was supporting a Wiki Data workshop in Germany. So I was actually helping them with some instructional design consulting. And in the process, I learned a lot about Wiki Data and Wiki Bases. When I learned about that, I was like, oh, this would be a really good way to kind of document what's going on with education in the movement. Would we be able to, have a wiki base for that one day? And so the Wiki Data people I was working with were like, yeah, it could be possible. And so I basically asked them to help us structure the data collection tool, which is the spreadsheet, in a way that would make it possible for us to one day just kind of batch upload all of the data to a wiki base. So the idea would be eventually there would be a central repository for all of this information that anyone could search and find the information they wanted to get. So if you wanted to know like how many education programs around the world are working on information literacy or mother language instruction, or how many are working with high school students, how many are working with primary school students, you would be able to find that information really easily. So that was the original concept, and Alan and Sailesh have done a really good job of putting all of that information that they've collected from all of these different like sources all over the place, from newsletters to country pages to annual grant reports, and kind of structuring it in a way that we can actually pull some good references from.
Is anyone aware of other examples within the Wikimedia context of using Wikibase to kind of do this kind of community knowledge management? I know there is a registry of Wikibases, which is something that is, so it's a Wikibase instance that is tracking other uses of Wikibase. So that's sort of one potential example. But has anyone heard of anything else where Wikibase is being used to kind of manage the community's own knowledge about a particular space of practice? Like in this example of education.
No, because setting up.
Hey, Asaf.
Hello, I was saying setting up a Wikibase, a highly technical task that most people aren't able to accomplish on their own. So there's a very high barrier to setting it up. So I think that's why we haven't seen much of that. Even though one of the Wikidata developers has developed a containerized version, it makes it a little easier to set up. It's still not something some program leader can do without some significant sysadmin experience, at least.
Right. This is a good point. There's still significant technical barriers to setting up a Wikibase instance, but it is something that we, Nicole and I have talked about. We want to explore feasibility of perhaps the foundation maintaining that as a resource to the community, looking into what would be involved there. Looks like there was a question.
So there's a question coming from the live stream, and the question is, were there any themes that emerged in your search that led to successful projects or posed challenges, irrespective of country?
I think ones that had strong institutional support, so whether that was partnering with a local university or NGO, or that there were some that even had really big government backing, I think those tended to, and again, the end, this number of samples was few, but it seemed like those had a lot of strong outcomes, and longevity was something that was a pattern I noticed. So I think if there are opportunities to partner with a local university or get teachers or school systems to really help with this, I think that can be really helpful for a lot of those projects to maintain sort of sustainability long term. Was one thing I noticed.
One of the projects that I noticed was the Uganda project, where some volunteers from Sweden they came to Uganda to do some Wikipedia activities in different schools of Uganda to create articles on Luganda language, which is, as per the report, is the second most spoken language in Uganda. So they faced. So they came with a goal to make a base of the volunteers for that language in Uganda, but they faced a lot of challenges initially from transferring from traditional method of teaching to modern method of teaching, how to involve the students to edit articles on Uganda Wikipedia. But as a part of their program for 2 months, they were quite succeeded in that project, and they improved and created a lot of articles on Ugandan Wikipedia. So I can say that one of the project I think was like posed challenges, but was successful for the student volunteers to do that.
Is this data about Uganda something you collected, or is it just based on their own reports?
It's on, so we have a Wikimedia blog about that, and it's also documented on outreach.wikimedia.org. So we have just extracted the data from there.
So you're based on reports, not data you've collected from the wikis.
Yes, it's based on reports, not on wikis. Sorry.
Okay. I wanted to PS my previous comment, Ben, that indeed the fact that we, the foundation, don't yet offer creating and hosting a Wikibase instance is part of this barrier. The day we do, we may see a lot of program leaders interested in starting to track structured data. There'll also no doubt be an inflation of irrelevant or inappropriate requests to start Wikibases. But that's the price we should pay for encouraging some innovation using Wikibases. But again, right now, even if people consider it briefly, they find out they can't actually do it or get started. They need to pull in all kinds of favors, and so they don't.
Yeah, it's something we should discuss. So what would it look like to kind of pilot that support, and something that we could bring to our colleagues in cloud services to kind of brainstorm kind of a sustainable approach to that.
I'll just like to say a few things. Even though if in future we won't be able to have our own wiki base for this project, but it's a quite interesting way that we have structured the data as we could have on the wiki base. Still, it's a very valuable resource and a very centralized data collection for community leaders to look over and try to localize in the community. even though if we in future we won't be able to have our own wiki base, it's still a very valuable resource that we have created for now.
Agreed. I think you guys have done a great job, and it is already a really great resource, and it's only going to improve.
Yeah, agreed. Didn't mean to kind of draw too much focus to the wiki base question. I think, as you said, it was, I think, brilliantly conceived that the data model in a very low barrier kind of format with a spreadsheet was kind of had that potential trajectory in mind. So it keeps all those doors open, but in the meantime, it makes it very easy for this data to be collected and I think soon contributed to from a broader base of community. So I think very well conceived, but with all those doors open to the future. Sailesh, I think you're speaking, but are maybe muted.
Yes. So indeed, we have collected a lot of data, and we haven't cleaned up some of the data. Like some of them might be repetitive. Like Alan and I did a different set of data collection, but we kind of use same platforms to do that. So we have to clean up this project. We'll finish it up by the coming week, and it will be open for the community to give us comment by then. Alan, if you want to talk about the cleanup activities that we have to do.
Yeah, I think it's going to just make sure that we're inputting each of the properties correctly, making sure that it's uniform and consistent, and then I think doing a quick check to make sure we didn't duplicate anything, which I think I noticed a couple, and then just formatting. But I think ultimately a lot of the preliminary work's going to be pretty much finished by the end of this week, so we're hopeful that we can give you guys something decent to be able to work with moving forward.
And I think that we're also going to work on creating kind of a guide on how to provide input to the data as well. So we'll have that to look forward to. And I think I should take this. Oh, my video is off. I think I should also take this opportunity to thank Maddie Bloom from Wikimedia Deutschland for a volunteer from Wikimedia Deutschland for helping to set up the initial spreadsheets for the data collection. That was really helpful to us. And we have a few more minutes still if anyone else has a question they'd like to ask. And if there are no more questions, then I would just like to say again, thank you to Alan and Sailesh for your hard work over the summer. There's a ping. Maybe, okay. So Sandra is asking, are you thinking about follow-up research both to deepen and to extend the work by Sailesh and Alan? Yeah, that is something we have to plan for because obviously this is an initial step into making this like a really robust database. We'd like to be able to use this data to pull out reports and to really kind of dig into what's happening in education in the movement around the world. So that is kind of how we're forward thinking about it, but it obviously is going to require some bandwidth from the team, and it's probably not something we'll be able to tackle right away, but this is just a really, really great first step for us to have, and we do plan on doing some further research. And Sailesh says the internship will end, but he's still happy to help. Thank you very much. Any other last questions? There's one more question from the live stream. I think that you guys answered this a couple of times, but if there's one more project that really stood out for you during the research, you can bring it up now.
Some of the education activities in Serbia and Bulgaria are quite fascinating and interesting. They have the Wikimedians of Bulgaria, they have documented their education activities very well. They have involved a diverse amount of subjects in the education program. It's not very streamlined. They have involved various educational institutions. They have involved various subjects in the education programs. And I can say that the community has worked above their comfort level and of education program. So I can say they're very interesting the way the community has managed to do such diverse program.
Thanks. Maybe I should ask one more time because every time I ask, there's another question. Any more questions?
Yeah.
All right, I think we're good. Thank you again. Thank you both, and you guys did some great work, and we're really happy to have this database. It's going to be a great help to both the team and the community. So really bravo. And I'll pass it to Ben to close us out.
I'll just echo this with strong thanks to Alan and Sailesh for just great work this summer. It was so good to have you. Sorry to lose you. Sailesh, I know you'll definitely be around in the community, and we'll see you a lot. And Alan, I hope that this engagement has kind of deepened your kind of attraction to the Wikimedia community, and that you'll be in contact and participating in various ways, and that we'll stay closely in touch. And thank you, Nicole, for organizing a really well-structured and thoughtful and impactful internship experience. I think there's a lot of mutual benefit here. And thanks everyone for joining the conversation and the stream, and thanks to Brendan behind me, who's been kind of hovering like the DJ in the background, kind of getting the live stream going and making sure everything went smoothly. So thank you all, and have a wonderful day, evening, afternoon, what have you.
Thank you.
Yeah.